I'll fly, and I'll fly into the end of the sky. So I'll be the one who doesn't have to say goodbye.
Hey guys, I'm loving reaction with my little penny video called A Process of Elimination, MLP Grimdark Audiobook, Part 4, Chapters 12 to 15. It is 1 hour, 27 minutes and 16 seconds long. Oh, yes. Okay, Process of Elimination, Part 4. So we got Chapters 12 to 15. That's why it is a long reaction today. And if you remember that last time with Prince Blueblood and Twilight, apparently it's totally... I think those days are over. I think... Well, I'm not sure if I'm getting this right. I'm not sure if we're... How long has passed since the last chapter in this chapter in terms of time frame? Maybe a year or so? I'm not too sure. Apparently there's something new in it that... Apparently I might laugh. Apparently. So, let's find out. Let's get this reaction started in 3, 2, 1, go. Right. Sparrow presents. Sparrow reads. And I'm just going to the background. Piano music again. I remember the piano
Process
music.
of Elimination. Written by the Seven Saviors.
Yes.
Chapter 12. The Encounter.
Encounter. We're going to encounter. Good music there.
Life had been somewhat quiet for the most part in the year and a half following the incident with Blueblood and Crimson Storm.
Right. Yeah, Crimson
It's
Storm.
quite some time to skip ahead, I'm aware.
Yes,
but honestly, nothing much has really changed for me during that time.
Nothing's changed,
At
not even
least,
good to mock.
when it came to my own inner demons.
Oh,
Frankly, I'd been too afraid to face them.
You're
and had
connected
tried
to the
live
devil,
my life
correct?
with my head down, acting
Well,
as
technically you only
normally as
got
I
one
possibly
horn, not
could,
two.
being Celestia's personal protege. Not sure what to do with myself, I did my best to shut out what happened and ignore the twisted dreams
I
that
don't
plagued
think
me
you can
almost every
ignore
night.
the fact it happens.
It had gotten
Twilight.
to the point where I'd dreamed not just of Blueblood and his father, but any random pony I'd seen in and around the castle. And each dream was more gruesome than the last, it seemed.
You
In
sure
a
you ain't
word,
got a lightning bolt on
I
your
was scared.
forehead, Twilight?
Despite Soundmind's reassurance
Sorry.
that I wasn't a bad filly, I couldn't accept my own horrible thoughts,
I don't know
so I
if you
shut it all
can
out and pretended
control
like
your
my problems
own-
didn't exist. With more than a bit
I'm
of
not sure
assistance from
how would you
Soundmind of all
control that if
ponies,
you had that sort of
I learned how to
that
keep
sort
my
of thing.
emotions
How
in
would you
check,
control it?
and I found that over the next few months, I became fairly good at hiding what I truly felt from others.
You need to study
Surprisingly so, in fact.
occupancy.
The
Occupancy.
psychotherapist still unnerved me,
Gentleman.
but I can't
That's
say
the
I
one.
wasn't grateful for his help in the matter. What made things all the easier for me was
What's
that ever since my talk with Celestia after that incident, I'd seen neither hide nor hair of Blueblood the Seventh or his right hoof filly Winter Chime.
Where'd he go then?
I'd seen Greedy Gut a few times, but it had mostly been in passing,
What a name!
and whenever
Greedy
he
Guts.
did notice me, he'd get scared and scamper away.
Yeah.
I thought it was strange at the time, but didn't really pay
It's
it any
still
mind.
strange.
That is,
Twilight.
until I found out much later why he was avoiding me. It was after that incident that I really began to lean on my introverted behavior.
Oh.
I became a borderline recluse, mostly locking myself in my bedroom and focusing on my thaumatological studies in my free time. Whenever I needed
That's
to
unhealthy.
leave, I would make sure to be courteous and smile to whoever I came across,
Smile.
knowing full well that the princess would start to worry if I showed any sign of unease or fear. It was why I was able to get away with my reclusive tendencies
You'd be
for so
very
long.
doomed
Rather than
if
worry
another
that I was
pony can read
distancing
your
myself
own
due to
mind,
what happened.
Twilight.
They simply chalked it up to preferring my privacy over the excessive company of others.
Well,
I didn't know it back
Dumbledore
then,
can read minds.
but I was effectively creating a mask for myself.
Yeah.
A mask that, while far from perfect then, would do wonders in hiding who and what I really was beneath that innocent exterior in the years to come.
Your inner demons, that's what it
I'm
is.
sure it wasn't normal for a filly of only 10 years to act the way I did.
Of course it's not
But my
normal,
circumstances and
Twilight!
psyche were anything but normal. Certainly, things had settled down for a time, but things would inevitably start to change for the worse once again after a time.
I surface one day,
It wasn't
Twilight.
until the end of that year and a half of peace that I began to drop my guard somewhat.
Yeah.
But I did eventually.
Yeah.
It was when I'd started to finally get used to life in the castle, when it finally started to feel like a second home,
You're
that
doomed.
my life was once more turned upside down, and I was far from prepared. Just like when I first met Blue Blood the 7th, my new problems didn't immediately make themselves clear. Living in the
It's
castle,
like confused
there was
dreams,
no
isn't
small
it?
influx of visiting
That's
nobles.
that's happened now,
Whether they were there for legitimate reasons regarding the businesses many of them owned, or to try
Yeah.
pushing reforms that would benefit them specifically, complain about current mandates in place, or to simply vie for Princess Celestia's favor, or the favor other more powerful nobles like Blue Blood the 6th,
Okay.
I couldn't seem to
Blue
escape
Blood
them.
the 6th? Of course
While
there'd be
most
many
of them
them,
paid
wouldn't
me
they?
no attention whatsoever, there were some who remembered
All-
what had happened during
Is
the
all the Blue
exam
Bloods the
and
same
would
then?
point and whisper. Not only that, but despite Celestia's silence on the matter, word had somehow still gotten around about what happened during the gala, though
Oh?
most of it was focused on Crimson Storm, and none of it was flattering. The hush gossip had gotten so bad
hush
that I eventually
gossip.
just tuned it all out together. Then came the day I chose to visit the Royal Archives seeking study material for an exam
Ooh, the
I'd be
Royal
taking
Archives,
at
haven't heard that
Celestia's
for
School
a
for
while.
Gifted Unicorns. A decision made by the princess herself.
Is it
It
restricted?
was completely overcast that day due to a scheduled drizzle that was supposed to last throughout the afternoon and into much of the evening.
A slight drizzle.
I remember it well because I
was
spent
that?
a good deal of time in my room staring out the window
Was
at the
that the
sky
video?
above while
Okay.
I was lost in thought. I'd moved the desk I normally sat at while I studied next to the window some time ago. It afforded a spectacular view of the rest of the city below
Well,
the
technically,
castle,
there was no window.
and it was
Oh, there was a
something I
window,
could
wasn't it?
certainly
Oh, it's on the ground
appreciate,
floor, isn't it? It's on the ground
even
floor,
if
isn't
most
it?
of my attention
The-
was usually focused
we
on the
never
book I
went back
was
to that
reading
place.
or the paper I was writing.
Yeah.
That day was different, though. The evening
Oh.
before, just as I was about to turn in for the night, I'd received a visit from the princess, who informed me then that I would be taking another exam and that it would once again take place at CSGU. Naturally, my panic was immediate and overwhelming.
That sounds
Why
like a
would Princess
university.
Celestia have me go through that again, knowing what happened? Was this some
Yeah.
kind of punishment? Did she find out about the twisted persona I
You
myself was trying
Twilight,
to
you're
hide away
panicking
from?
for no reason.
What could
I think.
possibly possess her to make such a decision? What if something happened again? These were
You're
my immediate thoughts upon hearing
You're
the news straight
overthinking
from the
stuff.
pony's
You're,
mouth.
you're panicking for no
Thankfully,
reason.
Celestia was quick to
Maybe
assure
it's just a
me that this
coincidence
would be
why
a written
Celestia's
exam
doing this to
only,
you.
which did wonders for my nerves, until I heard that if I passed, I'd be attending classes there 3 times a week for the next 3 months.
3 times
The
a week.
details were
That's
still
not
being
too
worked
bad,
out,
really, is it?
but Celestia assured me that I was far enough along in my personal lessons that even with only a couple of days of attendance a week, I'd be more than capable of keeping up with the other students.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, then why send me there at all? I already have the best teacher in the world. I had whined to the already
Maybe she's
exasperated
questioning your
princess.
ability.
And if I'm already ahead, then why even have the exam?
You still need
I'm surprised at you,
still-
Twilight.
You still need an exam.
Celestia had replied in mock bewilderment. Was it not your dream to get into my school? Didn't you want to rise to the top and graduate as one of the greatest mages since
true,
Star World
Twilight.
appeared? I can do that just fine with you teaching me. I pouted in response. You know way more than any pony teaching at the school. Why do I have to go there to learn from teachers that know less than you do? There has to be another reason.
Every
right?
pony's got their own composition.
But Celestia didn't answer right away, and instead shot me a strange look. I began to worry that I might have gone too far with my gripes.
No.
Celestia must have noticed, because a moment later, she shook her head and chuckled in amusement. No need to worry, Twilight. The mayor said with a dismissive
No
wave
need
of
to
her
worry,
hoof.
Twilight. What did I say to you?
The disparity you show between your age
Disparity?
and your
I've
wit
always said rarity.
sometimes just never ceases to amaze me, is all.
Oh?
My only response to that was to blink at her in bemusement. I knew what she meant, and the comment made me blush slightly, but I honestly hadn't thought I'd said anything particularly clever. The princess sending me off to her school
clever
for
is
lessons taught by
on
ponies
the
who
inside.
didn't
Your
have
knowledge
her
is on the
extensive
inside,
font
on the
of
outside,
knowledge and
Twilight.
wisdom didn't make any sense to me. That there had to be another motive should have been obvious to any pony.
Another motive.
Still, I was right.
Yeah.
Celestia did indeed have another motive, and it seemed some of the earlier assumptions I'd had about her worries were wrong somewhat, judging by her explanation.
Oh?
But yes, you're right.
Yeah.
The princess
Yes?
continued, her smile becoming a little softer and slightly apologetic.
Yeah.
There are, in fact, two reasons why I'm having you attend the school. The
Oh.
first is that I will be busier than usual these next few months entertaining an ambassador from Saddle Arabia during her extended stay in Equestria.
Yeah, she's still a princess at the end of the day,
Though
Twilight.
I wanted to argue, I couldn't really say anything against that.
No.
Celestia was a princess before she was a teacher. She had to be.
Yeah.
There were certain duties she had to perform, and many of those duties took precedent over furthering my education.
Yes.
To assume otherwise would not only be selfish, but
Same
ignorant.
what Dumbledore did. He's a
Even
teacher,
as a filly,
but
I
he's
understood
chasing
that
after
much,
Horcruxes.
and that's why I kept my mouth shut.
She's not a Horcrux, is she?
Then Celestia continued, and what she said next made me realize that simply acting like nothing was wrong with me hadn't been enough.
No.
I also think it will be good experience for you,
Yes, it
the
would.
princess said, pulling me
Yeah.
across my bed into a loose hug, and looking down at me with an expression that oozed both motherly affection and concern. I know you like your solitude,
Yeah.
but there are things worth learning that can only be taught by being surrounded by your peers. Fools your own age striving to reach the same heights as you. Those
Reach
kinds of
for the
things
stars.
I can't
Climb
teach you,
every
Twilight.
mountain. Reach for the stars.
And so, I sat alone in my room at my
that
desk
is
the next day,
S Club 7, I
tired
believe.
from lack of sleep due to stress and unable to
Was
focus
it
on my
steps?
studies. I turned my
I
gaze
get those
instead
two
to the milky gray sky
mixed up
above,
sometimes.
as if waiting for the answer to my predicament to reveal itself in the clouds. I normally didn't let my mind wander often anymore for fear of where it might take me,
Yeah.
but I couldn't help it this time. I couldn't help but wonder what was in store for me. Celestia had been right. Before my disastrous exam, I wanted nothing more than to be a student attending that school.
Yeah.
But things were different now.
Oh.
I was different in more ways than one, and was afraid of what might happen if I was around others my age. I was afraid of what competition would do to me, and of what I would do. I'd heard that gaining the title of
If you're-
Princeps Magus upon graduation was a battle in and of itself among
I'm just thinking of
students.
her magic's gonna go
And
haywire
back
or
then,
something.
I was willing to throw myself into that fight if it meant I could reach Star Swirl's level of mastery.
Or she might
But
sleep,
now-
sleep in
Now
the
I was on
sleep
the
in the
fast
class.
track to that goal, and I didn't even have to compete with
You
anyone.
know, when she sleeps in the class.
It really was a dream come true.
We'll try to
or
Harry
it
Potter
would
sleeps in the
be if I
class
could just keep
and
a
actually
lid on my
reads
more
Voldemort's
macabre
mind.
nature. As it always inevitably did whenever my mind wandered, the thought of my sickness rose to the surface and began pushing aside my more mundane worries.
Yeah.
I grimaced and shook my head before turning my attention back to the textbook I'd been trying to read for the last half hour or so.
How big is
Truthfully,
this
I'd
textbook?
already read through the entire thing more than once, but I'd figured a
Of course you
refresher
would.
couldn't hurt.
No.
In truth, I wasn't too keen on passing this test, but that didn't
No?
mean I was going to fail on purpose either. I wasn't that kind of pony and refused to be that kind of pony even in these circumstances. I just have to pass and
test
deal
is
with whatever
important,
came
Twilight.
next. I couldn't
Still.
let the princess down, and there was no way I could live with the shame of failing a written exam I could have passed with ease.
Ooh,
The problem was that I wasn't getting any work done, and this textbook wasn't holding my attention well enough.
Oh?
With a melancholic sigh, I closed the book and floated it back over to my personal bookshelf before hopping off my seat. Before I'd gone to bed,
What's that?
Celestia had given me a roll of parchment with a list of subjects that would be on the upcoming exam and their descriptions.
Like magic?
After a moment's thought, I took the rolled up scroll from where it sat on my desk, unfurled it, and looked it over.
Oh.
Most of the subjects I'd already studied and memorized completely,
Oh?
but there were still a few topics I had yet to fully grasp, such as transmogrification and crystal-based magic. I furrowed my brow before looking back
Forget
over
Professor
to my bookshelf.
McGonagall, she can help you.
At a glance, I knew I didn't have any tomes that covered those subjects, at least not in any great detail. There were,
Where
however,
would you learn that,
bound
though?
to be
When will you learn-
textbooks that covered those topics extensively in the Royal Archives.
Go to that.
The
Go
thought
then.
brought a small smile to my face.
Get
Normally,
textbook.
ponies weren't let into the archives without good reason, and I was no exception. The Royal Archives, unlike the Grand Canterlot Library, were home to books deemed too dangerous, controversial, or otherwise classified to be distributed to the general public. Still, being the princess's student did have its perks in what I was allowed to enter, so long as I had a chaperone and it was for my studies.
Yeah.
The archives housed more knowledge than anywhere else in Canterlot,
Oh.
and I was happy to have any excuse to enter. Thankfully, I just so happened to have such an excuse floating before me.
Get Professor
And
Lockhart's
so, with
signature.
parchment in tow and renewed spirits, I practically skipped to the door of my bedroom, pulled it open, and stepped out.
Stepped out.
Only to literally bump into some pony I hadn't seen in a while, and had almost forgotten about entirely.
Prison?
Watch where you're going, you... The other filly I'd nearly bowled over stumbled back before shooting me a glare. A glare that transformed into several different unpleasant expressions in the span of a second when she saw who'd run into her.
Who?
You. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I blurted out as I attempted to recover the scroll I'd dropped with my magic. It was my fault. I wasn't paying attention and... wait. I know you. You're... I blinked and frowned as I suddenly turned my eyes towards the other filly.
Oh?
My eyes widened, and my heart sank into my stomach a moment later when I finally recognized the
That
seafoam
music.
green coat and burgundy mane.
That
done
music
up in a
is like
loosely
the
braided bob.
Tomb Raider.
Winter Chime.
Winter Chime.
She was one of the last ponies I wanted to see again, and seeing her again, the memory of that night in the dungeons flashed through my mind with vivid intensity.
That must have bad.
Particularly the
That must be
violent
how
push
bad
down the
memories
stairs
follow.
and the resulting pain in my leg.
Pain
Winter
your leg?
Chime's eyes flashed with rage at the sound of her name, so much so that I took a fearful step back. Caught off guard and suddenly on edge, I glanced around to see if Blue Blood was nearby, but to my slight relief, there was no pony else in the hall at the moment. I turned back to Winter Chime just in time to see the glare slide off of her face and her expression to twist into a half-lidded smirk.
Smirk?
The change was so abrupt that I couldn't help but shiver involuntarily and take another step back.
One step back, one
Twilight
step forward.
Sparkle. She finally replied in a sickly sweet voice.
Twilight Sparkle.
It's been far too long since we've seen each other.
far
I'd
too
love
long.
to catch up, but I have things to do elsewhere.
But
I'm sure we'll meet again soon
She's the
enough,
diamond
though.
tiara
And
of the
I'll be
group.
able to give a proper apology for all that nastiness from before.
Oh?
Her smirk vanished behind a genuine-looking smile for a brief second as she made her way past me.
Will she be the one who
knows?
dies in the end then?
Maybe we can even become friends. Real friends.
Why say it like
With
that?
one
though?
last wave, she turned away and trotted further
Friends?
down the hall.
I think I
I'll
can
be
tell
looking
one sort for
forward
myself,
to
thanks.
catching up. It wasn't long
I don't
before
like
she
her
turned
voice.
a distant corner and was completely out of sight.
I know it's you,
her
Sparrow, but
departure
you know what I
did
mean!
nothing to quell the rising dread in my gut. If anything, it only grew as unpleasant memories began to resurface despite my attempts to shove them deep into the recesses of my mind. I swallowed and quickly scurried off the other way, grateful that the archives were in the opposite direction from where Winter Chime was headed.
Yeah.
I tried to focus on the Royal Archives. I tried to think about the knowledge contained therein.
Oh?
I tried to mentally catalog what I'd need for my research, but nothing helped.
No?
All I could think about was what the near future held and how motivated I'd suddenly become in passing that exam.
The exam is important, Twilight.
Chapter 13. The Archives.
Chapter 13, okay.
My sudden encounter with Winterchime was a shock I had a hard time getting over as I made my way to the Royal Archives. As preoccupied with my thoughts as I was, I'd completely forgotten that I needed a chaperone present before the pony guarding the doors to the archives would even let me in.
Oh, like
The
a
Royal
guard.
Guard and I knew each other by name and face by this point, but rules were rules, and Ironsides was a stickler for said rules.
Ironsides?
That being the
That's
case,
how you
all
kept
I
his
got
name,
when I
you know.
finally reached the
That's
doors
a
to the
TV show
archives
called
was a
Ironsides.
stern look and a firm, "Sorry kid, but you know the rules," from the aging Earth Pony Guard. We went back and forth on the matter, but the stallion's stubbornness ultimately won out and I had no choice but to back
Earth
down.
Pony? I thought they were all
That wasn't
unicorns.
before a brief image of a dream I'd had about the stallion flashed across my mind.
Oh?
In my irritation, I let my mind wander and found myself thinking about what I'd done to Ironsides with my magic, one of the archive doors, and his own helmet. Looking back, that dream had
Twilight,
been
you're
both strange
dangerous.
and horrifying. It's ridiculous to think I could do anything like that as I was back then.
Yeah.
Still, implausible or no, those dreams and the strange emotions that came with them still scared me. It was for that reason that I chose to retreat, hoping the
Oh.
stallion hadn't noticed how pale my face had probably looked. It happened in rare cases
Are you
where
sure
the
you're not
image
trying
of
to come
some
out for
pony
now
I'd
with
done
pale-
terrible
pale
things
face?
to would pop up in my mind when I talked to that particular pony.
Yeah.
It usually happened when my dreams had been recent, and in the case with Ironside, that dream had only happened a few days ago at the time.
Yeah.
Luckily, I had some techniques I could use to get my mind back under control.
Yeah.
Both learned from my therapist, and one I learned from my old babysitter back before I took that exam. Before I could think about using any of what I'd learned, a sudden distraction presented itself.
What's that?
I hadn't even gone a few yards down the corridor from where Ironsides was standing when another familiar stallion rounded the corner,
Oh.
whistling some kind of tuneless yet jaunty ditty. The stallion in question was none other than Bulwark, the rookie
Bulwark?
guard I'd met after I'd been separated from Crimson Storm.
She's not rookie
He'd
now, is
become
she?
a full-fledged guard in that time since
Yeah.
then, and I'd seen him around the castle every so often, but we never really talked much again, aside from the odd friendly greeting here and there.
Yeah.
As far as
Not-
guards
not your head or
went,
something.
he was pretty friendly and had a fairly laid-back personality and had somehow only grown over the last year and a half. Seeing the stallion coming my way, my eyes lit up and I jumped at the opportunity. Once I was close enough, I galloped over and flagged him down, much to his surprise. "Oh, hey
Ooh.
kiddo."
Hey.
He called back as I rushed over to him. "Not very often we get to see you out and about. How have you been?"
No. Twilight's
"I'm
always
doing okay,
Twilight's an
thanks.
indoor type.
but listen," I replied, trying to catch my breath. "Are you busy right now?"
Is
"Just
that a
making my
ship?
normal rounds, but my break's coming up here in a few."
She's
He
well.
shrugged
Twilight.
before giving me a
Twilight's
curious
actually
frown.
worried about something, but the
"Why?"
way she
You need
she sounded, she's worried.
In response, I held out the roll of parchment I'd been carrying, and he took it, his curious frown turning somewhat bemused.
What's on the parchment?
"I was heading to the archives so I could do some research on a few subjects for an exam I have coming up."
She loves research. That
I
research.
explained as the stallion unfurled the scroll and looked over the contents. "But Ironsides won't let me in without a chaperone."
A chaperone.
So that's it then, is it?"
Yes.
He nodded before rolling the parchment back up. Well,
Maybe.
I'm just about done here, so I don't see any problem keeping an eye on you for a while.
Yeah. Why not?
Really? I asked, taking back the scroll.
Bend the wall slightly.
Is it okay for you to help me while you're on duty? I mean, I appreciate it, really. And I know I asked, but I don't want you to get in trouble. Nah,
No trouble at all.
it should be fine as long as you don't spend too much time looking around. He replied with a dismissive wave.
Yeah, you don't want to someone to spot
Just
you doing
grab what
it.
you need, and I'll take care of the chaperone business.
Yes.
Actually, I can't really take books out of the archives.
No, you can't.
I murmured, staring down at my hooves and hoping this wasn't a deal breaker. We'd have to stay in the archives while I do my research.
Yeah, oh, gosh. That's going to be hard.
Bulwark furrowed his brow in thought for a few seconds before giving a careless shrug. We'll figure something out. Come on, let's go talk to old Ironsides about letting you in. With that,
Is that
he
gonna
led
work?
back down the corridor to the rail archives, where Ironsides was still keeping vigil at the doors like a stone sentinel. All the while, I silently resolved to try and talk to Bulwark more
Ponyville.
often whenever I had the chance to see him. There weren't very many Pegasi wandering about the castle. Even within the Royal Guard, the unicorns and earth ponies outnumbered them by a fair margin.
Yeah.
In fact, the only other Pegasus I'd gotten to know in the castle had been Crimson Storm, so I was hesitant to get close to another Pegasus in the military. I knew intellectually
Is that
they
the
were
female
entirely
one? Is that the
different
female,
ponies with entirely
one?
different personalities, but in
You
my
don't see
paranoid
many
Philly brain,
female
that didn't
guards,
matter.
do you?
Still, after having talked to him again and having seen him around and openly conversing with other ponies, he really did strike me as an all-around nice stallion. He was
Yeah.
open and sociable, and nothing like Crimson Storm was. So I began to think,
So it's like a
maybe
rainbow dasher.
it wouldn't hurt to be a bit more friendly. I may have been okay being a
It doesn't-
borderline
it
recluse,
does- it's not-
but that was
it's-
most likely because I was scared
That's
of
what you
talking
need to be. You need to
others
be
for fear
more
of
friendly.
what I
It
might
doesn't
think
hurt
or
not to
do.
be. Or something.
At the end of the day, though, ponies are social creatures who need some pony to talk to every once in a while.
Yeah.
That was doubly true for foals, and as reluctant as I was to get close to any pony else, I sometimes couldn't help
Follow
but
you,
feel a bit
foals.
lonely holed up in my room all the time. With that thought came the idea that maybe some time away from the castle would actually do me some good.
Yeah.
An idea that was quickly quashed by my earlier mentioned fears. Trying not to think about what going to school would be like, I refocused my attention back on the world outside my own mind.
And the studies?
We reached the entrance to the archives, and Bulwark was already talking to Ironsides, who was eyeing me with a look I couldn't quite place.
There's this Twilight Sparkle
Looking
thing in the
back,
story.
I
then.
think it might have been worry, but his wrinkled face was so grizzled, and his dark green eyes
This
were
is
so
Twilight
hard, that
Sparkle
the expression came
when
off as
aging the
kind of
story.
scary instead. Needless to say, I was quick to lower my gaze, doing everything I could not to meet his.
No. Don't
After
give
a
eye
bit of back and
contact.
forth between Bulwark and Ironsides, the older guard finally relented and let us pass.
You
He
may
gave
pass.
Ironsides a murmured "thank you" and hurried in past Bulwark, who held one of the doors open for me. There was a strange and nostalgic mix of scents wafting through the massive repository
And,
of Equestria's
cold stone
recorded
clock.
history that always put me at ease. The moment I stepped into the multi-story wing
Apple
of the
Bloom.
castle,
What are you
all
doing
my
in
fears
the
and worries
archives?
melted away. I was no history buff, but the sheer amount of knowledge contained within the royal archives always filled me with a sense of awe and reverence.
Reverend.
There were rows and rows and
rows.
rows of not just tomes, but all manner of carefully preserved documents, old important photographs, all kinds of maps, and historical artifacts. Seeing it all was enough to make me forget about my
So
encounter with
it's
Winter
more
Chime and my
than
horrid dreams.
the archives. It's like
It wasn't often that I was let into the archives.
it kind of reminds me of
but
Harry
whenever
Potter.
I did get a
I'm
chance
sorry,
to come here,
the Black
it always
Archives
felt like my own
of,
personal holy sanctuary. I was
Daleks,
so enraptured by it all that I completely
monsters.
forgot about the stallion who made it possible for me to be there that day. An impressed whistle brought me back
you
to
gonna thank him
reality,
later?
and I jumped slightly before turning to see Bulwark cast his own surprised gaze across the expansive space before him. You know, I've
never
passed this
been.
place a bunch of times before,
You haven't been in, have you?
but this is the first time I've actually been inside.
Yeah.
He commented,
So
heard the Royal
you're
Archives
guarding
were huge,
the palace, but never
but
actually
this
got
is
inside.
way more than I expected. His gaze fell to where I stood, and he raised an inquisitive eyebrow. You
Cool.
sure you're gonna be able to find what you need before the sun sets?
Yes.
I replied easily, puffing out my tiny chest with
Yep.
pride.
I'm good at research.
Ancient Scroll told me about how everything is categorized, and I've more or less memorized where all the tomes and documents related to thaumatology are.
How?
Ancient Scroll? Bulwark asked with a bemused frown.
What ancient scroll then?
Oh, he's the Royal Archivist. I replied as I began to make my way to where I knew my research materials were waiting.
Yeah.
He used to be a teacher at Celestia's school and knows all kinds of neat stuff.
Yeah.
Ah, I gotcha.
I gotcha.
Bulwark nodded in understanding. Sounds like an interesting guy.
Yes.
He is. I agreed. I
Yeah.
haven't talked to him in a while, though.
Where is
I
he
wonder
gone
if
then?
he's at the desk today. Before I could get into my research, I needed to check in with the pony sitting at the front desk to get my ID card.
ID
The
card.
archive ID card was a bit different from a library card in that
Nope.
only certain ponies, usually castle staff, certified scholars, or other ponies whose job specifically required one, could own and use one.
Yes.
The other difference was, like everything else in
Having
Royal
fun
Archives,
isn't
you
hard
couldn't take
if you
one
got
with
a
you when you left.
special library card.
The cards were stored in a back room behind the front desk, and the pony at the desk would have to retrieve it for you before you could peruse the archive's contents.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I was
actually.
lucky
so
enough
you
to
don't
be
get
granted
stolen.
my own ID by the princess herself, despite how young I was, as a gift for passing a particularly difficult test a while back.
Yeah.
The ponies who worked in the archives, including Ancient Scroll, weren't too keen on the idea of giving a full access to the previous items stored upon the many shelves.
Why not?
Thankfully, my somewhat fastidious nature and love and respect for knowledge as a whole did a
Yeah.
lot to convince them that I could be trusted. Ancient
So
Scroll was my favorite
persuasive.
pony to talk to whenever I visited, but I had a fairly good relationship with all the ponies working in the archives.
Yeah.
I was hoping to see the old stallion, but as Bulwark and I made our way to
There's
the front
someone
desk,
new
I could
there.
see that it was another pony working behind
Yeah.
the desk. A middle-aged unicorn mare I hadn't seen before. The mare had a lime green coat, a bobbed light gray mane, and tired amber eyes that sat behind
It's not
thick
Lockhart, then.
half-moon spectacles. By the dour expression she wore, it was clear the mare would have rather
McGonagall!
been anywhere else but where she was now.
Sorry, that's so bad.
Normally, the front desk was handled either by a chipper Earth Pony stallion named Silver Clip or the old unicorn stallion Ancient Scroll himself,
Who is it then?
but neither of them were anywhere to be seen.
Who's
Instead,
at the
I
table?
went up to greet this mare, whose attention was focused solely on some trashy gossip magazine she was lazily flipping through. I remember being irritated that the mare had chosen to read some boring magazine
It
when
must
there
be
were
boring
literally
now if you've got no.
thousands of other
If
far
you're
more
boring,
interesting
it
things
must be
to read
boring
all
doing that
around
sort of
her.
job. You don't
Rather
get
than say
visitors
anything
every
about what I
day.
thought, I instead tried to catch her attention. Excuse me?
Excuse me.
I said, craning my neck up as I came close to the desk. Miss, my name is
Miss?
Twilight Sparkle. I'm here to... I trailed off, noticing she hadn't even bothered to look up from her magazine.
She's
I frowned.
more
and
intense
tried
than a
again,
magazine.
Speaking a
Maybe it's
bit
a pony
louder this time.
magazine.
Ma'am?
Ma'am?
Hello?
Hello?
I'm here to do some research and I need my... No response from the mare. I didn't want to fault the mare too badly for ignoring me while she was reading, because I knew I had the same problem.
Yeah.
That said, I still couldn't help the building irritation of being brushed off by some pony that was supposed to be helping me.
Hello?
Before I had a chance to worry about my irritation turning into something a little more problematic, Bulwark stepped forward and cleared his throat loudly. The mare startled slightly and whipped her head around to face the stallion. Her expression ran the gamut from annoyed to surprised to false geniality.
Yeah.
Oh!
You
She
just see you there.
exclaimed in an apologetic tone. I'm so sorry, dear. I'm afraid I was rather enthralled with...
The book.
She
Magazine.
gave the magazine a quick side glance before sliding it away.
Cosmere. Magazine.
But never mind that. what brings you to the Royal Archives today?
What brings you?
Well, I'm so glad you asked.
Yes.
The guard replied before jerking his head
Is that
towards where
English?
I was standing. Believe it or not, it's this young lady here who brought me to the Royal Archives. It seems she has some business with you?
Yes.
The mayor finally turned to me, and the moment we locked eyes, she made a face. I wasn't sure what kind, because it disappeared far too quickly for me to make out.
Are you too young to be here?
Whatever the look had been, she replaced it with an apologetic smile. You'll have to forgive me, dear,
What?
she said.
What? What's wrong?
Didn't quite see you down there.
Yeah, she's
I
quite.
called out
She's
to
tiny.
you. Twice.
Twice.
I replied
That's true.
flatly. I wanted to complain a bit more, but I chose to ask another question instead. Who are you anyway?
Who are you?
And where's Silver Clip? He's usually the one sitting here.
Who are
Him
you? That's a good
or Ancient
question.
Scroll? Something about this didn't sit right with me, but I couldn't quite place my hoof on why at the time.
Are they dead?
All I knew was that I was getting very bad vibes from this lady. Oh,
She
fair
is a
questions,
murderer?
I suppose, the mayor said with a
Is it-
nod.
Is it a trap?
Well, from what I understand,
It's always a trap,
Young
isn't
Stallion
it?
has unfortunately left his position to pursue another career path. She gestured to herself.
That sounds like a trap to
I'm
me.
his replacement, you see. You can call me Floral Delight.
Floor with the light.
Wait, what?
Sounds
I
like
cried.
it sounds like
blinking
ice
in
cream
disbelief.
flavored.
But
Or
Silverclip
margarine.
loved his job. Why would he quit? I'm sorry, dearie, but I couldn't tell you. Floral Delight
I don't
shook her
trust
head
this.
sadly. All
Mayor.
I know is what
Oh
I've heard.
dearie, it's like a
As for the
Umbridge
Royal
sort of thing
Archivist,
from
it
Harry
seems
Potter.
he's been
It's
away
like an-
on vacation as of a few days ago.
That's a
The
lie.
replacement should be
That has
here
to be
by
a lie.
tomorrow.
That has to be like Umbridge.
In the meantime, it's just me and a few of the other assistants here right now, I'm afraid. Vacation? I repeated
Something
quietly,
doesn't sit right here.
my brow furrowing in bemusement. But, well, he has been working here for a long time.
Yeah, and
I tried to convince myself that it made sense.
it
But
doesn't
something
make sense.
still felt off.
That's what I
Unable
said.
to place it, and aware that I didn't have a lot of time as it was, I shook my head and decided to move on.
Move on, Twilight.
Okay, well, like I said earlier, my name is Twilight Sparkle, and I'm here
Yeah.
to do some research.
Yes.
Can I have my ID, please?
Please?
Twilight Sparkle, you say?
Yes.
You seem awfully young to have an ID.
Oh, come on!
Floral Delight frowned thoughtfully before stepping away from the counter and towards the door leading to the back room. Bear with me for a bit, would you, dears? I won't be but a moment. A few
She'll be
seconds
gone-
later, she disappeared into the back room.
I
The
don't think
moment
she's
she
gonna
was
come
out
back.
of sight, Bulwark and I looked at each other, and the stallion spoke first.
Something's up.
Hey, maybe it's not really my place to say. He began, lowering his head closer to me and speaking in a near whisper. But the timing seems kind of strange, don't you think?
Yes.
Maybe. I replied,
She's
just
an
as quietly,
imposter, maybe.
and with a good amount of uncertainty. I don't know.
Maybe she's the one who's gonna
I-
die. I don't know.
I think I get the feeling that lady already knows me. Really?
How?
Bulwark raised his head and stared at the
How
back
though?
room door.
How does she know you?
You think so, huh?
Yes.
Well, Miss Delight is certainly trying to live up to her name. But to be honest, I'm not exactly
It is
buying it.
ice cream. Angel Delight.
So, that was it.
Sorry,
We
that's so
both
bad.
knew something was wrong, but all we could do was wait for the mayor to come back out with my ID.
Is she gonna come back
I
out
had
though?
several questions, but I figured it would be better to ask some of the other ponies working here in the archives. I was fairly sure I wasn't going to get any more answers from Floral Delight.
No, you won't.
Bulwark and I waited for a good 5 or 6 minutes while the mayor searched for my ID, and with each passing minute, I began to grow more worried.
More auspicious as well.
Silverclip would have been in and out of the back
Not
room
Silver
in a
Quill,
minute
then.
with my card, but this mare had been taking far too long. It was
Yes.
possible that she was having trouble with the filing system, given that neither Silverclip nor Ancient Scroll was there
I
to
don't
teach
think
her
she
how it
actually
worked.
technically works
The
there.
problem with that was that there were still other ponies who could have helped her to figure it out,
Yeah,
and I was sure Silverclip would have taught her before he left.
yeah.
All these thoughts ran through my head as I waited for Floral Delight to return, and when she finally did, there was no card to be seen. I'm terribly sorry, Twilight Sparkle, was it? She began, taking her place back behind the desk.
What excuse you
It
gonna give?
appears I have no identification cards under that name.
That's a lie.
What? I shouted. Of course there is. There has to be. The princess gave me that card herself. Oh. Is that so?
Yes.
The mare replied, her eyes widening in genuine shock. For a brief second, her surprised gaze shifted to Bulwark before moving back over to me. Well, that's certainly... perhaps it was misplaced. She cleared her throat
She's hiding
softly,
something.
getting her surprise under control
She's hiding
before
something.
continuing in a calmer tone. If that's the case, then I'll do my best to locate your ID. But in the meantime, I can't allow you to use the archives without it.
No.
But I need to use the archives. I have an
She's got-
exam coming up.
She's got research to
I
do,
won.
man.
What am I supposed to do now? Well, if you're looking for a suggestion, there's always the Grand Canterlot Library. The mayor proposed kindly. Granted, their selection isn't as extensive as what we have here in the Royal Archives.
Yeah.
The amount of research materials they have in stock is
Seriously.
by no means meager. But that... Well, I guess it can't be helped then.
No.
Bulwark cut in. It's a shame, but what can you do, right?
What can
We'll
you do?
leave it at that for now and take our leave.
Yeah.
Thanks for the help. Anytime, dear. Delight replied with a genial
I still
smile.
don't trust her.
We'll do our utmost to find that ID of yours. It's not every day you're given a gift like that. And from the princess, no less.
Yes.
I
On the
know,
princess.
The stallion replied as he gently began to lead me in the other direction towards the entrance.
Right.
She's one lucky filly, having a mentor like that. Indeed,
Very lucky.
the mayor replied. Well, you have yourselves a wonderful day now. You do the same. He called back before turning to me.
She's got like an evil sort
on
of
now.
voice.
We'd best get going. But
It's like a
my
dictatorship
ID,
sort of thing.
we can't do anything about it right now.
No?
He whispered. In times like these, it's best to just retreat and regroup.
Yeah. Where does Altavia
I
come
turned
into play
to look
then?
back at Floral Delight, only to find her once again with her nose in that trashy magazine. The courteous smile completely gone as if
There's
it
so many
had never existed.
ponies that who can actually die in
Seeing
this
that,
episode.
I felt something dark and unpleasant try to crawl its way out of me. Thankfully, I was able to recognize it for what it was and quickly shoved it back down in a panic before turning away and practically marching back to the entrance.
Marching back. March. March.
Fine. Let's just get out of here.
Yes, get out of
I
here.
heard
Now.
Bulwark
Get,
pause
Twilight,
behind
get
me
out of
for
here,
a brief
please.
second before following a moment later.
Yeah.
I didn't look back to see what the issue was, and
No.
didn't say anything else until we'd put a good bit of distance between ourselves and the Royal Archives and Ironsides.
Ironside, yeah.
I finally turned to confront Bulwark, but the stallion spoke first.
Oh, he knows.
Yeah.
He noticed something.
Definitely something fishy going on, all right.
Yeah.
He surmised with a sigh.
Something's fishy going on.
And before you get all huffy about what happened back there, let me just say I get where you're coming from,
Yeah.
but I don't think arguing about it would have helped.
What's the worst that can happen?
Maybe there was something we could have done about it.
You
argued.
sure?
We could have asked the other ponies working there. They know me already. Somehow, I don't think that would have worked out either.
No. She would have
Bulwark
stopped you.
replied with a shake of his
She would have
head.
stopped you.
I'm no detective, but if there really is something going on, if they're trying to keep you out of the archives for whatever reason, then I'm sure Mr. Light would have taken those other ponies into account.
Yes.
Why would she do that, though? I asked, almost
She wants you
desperate
dead,
for an
maybe. I
answer.
don't know.
I didn't do anything to her. I don't even know her. Sometimes it's not about the pony right in front of you, but the pony standing behind the pony in front of you.
What?
He murmured in response, almost to himself.
Meaning?
When he saw my look of utter confusion, he chuckled and shook his head again.
Yeah.
Look,
Look.
why don't you take Mr. Light's advice for now? I'll see what I can do about your ID card. Wait, you
gonna
will?
help me? Well,
I
she
asked in
is,
surprise.
but she's actually quite nice.
Don't you have to go back on duty soon? I'll make time somehow. He waved away my concerns
Make the
with
time.
a huff.
That's what you call like a loyalty friend.
Besides, it's the least I can do after...
You haven't got a loyalty card, have you?
Well... His lazy smile fell slightly, and he chuckled again before turning away and looked back at me from over his shoulder. Just don't worry about it. I've got you covered, little lady.
I got you covered.
I tried asking him what he meant, but he started off down the corridor, waving back to me one last time.
Yeah.
Just make sure you study hard and pass that exam, alright?
Yes.
He called back.
How? If you don't get
You
the
want to make
books?
the princess proud, don't you?
Yes, she does.
And with that, he turned a distant corner and was gone. Like
Disappeared.
Wintertime, I watched him go until he was out of sight. I stood there for a moment, mulling over what had just happened, but in the end, I just left to find Princess Celestia. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to tell her, but it was true that I still had some
How can you
studying
tell?
to do.
How can you
If Bulwark wanted
bring
to
up the
help
words
me,
to tell
then I
her
would leave it
the
up to
suspicions
him.
that you got, Twilight?
After my encounter with Wintertime and what happened in the archives, I got this deep, ominous sense that life was going to get hard for me again.
Gonna get really
Ultimately,
hard.
I decided to double down on ignoring the problem. After all, I just had to pass the
You
exam.
need to take
and
advice
then
from
school would keep me
Octavia.
too busy
You need to
worry
cello
about any
down now,
potential
alright?
drama that might come up. That's what I said to myself anyway.
Sorry.
Whether or not
Sorry,
I
guys.
actually believed it was another matter entirely. And what's more, my successful attempt to hide my twisted emotions back in the archives did
A
nothing
flurry of
to stop
emotions.
the dreams I had about Floral Delight later that night.
That rhymed.
Chapter 14. The Library. With my ID missing and no other viable
You're in
avenues
the,
left to me for the moment,
normal
I had no
library
choice
then.
but to inform
Normal
the princess
library.
of my situation and intentions to find another chaperone willing to take me into the city. The Grand Canterlot Library was a fair distance away from the capital, past the wealthier districts infested with the nobility and sitting right in the middle of the most populated part of Canterlot.
Yeah, it's quite a
I'd
big
been
library.
out and
though.
about a few times during my stay in the castle, and of course, when I visited my family on occasion, usually during the holidays.
Yeah. Oh,
Outside
that's
of
all
those
left there
specific
then.
occasions, however, going outside to do anything was usually the furthest
It's
thing from my
Octavia
mind.
at the library.
I had
studying
everything
music.
I needed in the castle. Everything was more or less provided for me, courtesy of the princess and the castle staff.
Yeah.
I don't want to give the illusion that it made me spoiled or anything. The issue was that I didn't mesh well with a general crowd of strangers.
Oh.
Before the incident and during
So
social
you
gatherings within
don't
Canterlot
like-
Castle, my anxiety was manageable. Negligible even.
Yeah.
If anything, like what happened before happened again,
You
I knew
either
I
work
could
on
bring
your
it
own,
up with the
Twilight. That's the thing. You
princess.
either work on your own. You don't like
Out in the
to
city
be
proper,
in a crowded
there were no
situation.
such assurances. There was only a vague sense of paranoia and fear that something might go wrong
Paranoia!
and that it might end up being my fault.
It's
Needless
not
to
your
say,
fault though.
having been forced
You
outside
tried
to
your
confront
best,
those fears in a
and it
situation
didn't
where I
work
was
out, you
already
just-
worried that something was
you
about
just
to go
keep on
wrong
going.
didn't help my nerves in the slightest.
I didn't blame you.
That was to say nothing of my escort, a diminutive and rather mousy unicorn mare who looked almost as uncomfortable wandering around town as I did.
Yeah.
From what I understood, she normally acted as one of the maids within the castle. It was an off day,
Maids.
and she had no pressing matters to attend to, so she agreed to accompany me to the Grand Library. She was a nice enough mare,
The Grand
but her somewhat
Gala
timid
Library.
disposition was only making me more nervous as we made our way deeper into
Oh,
the
sorry
city.
for the noise there. Oh my
The
gosh,
soft
sorry
rain
about that.
pattering against our umbrellas as we
I saw it
walked,
not on the way from
fairly
the door.
soothing though
Okay.
it was, did little to quell my unease.
I need this.
Though I couldn't quite shake the nameless apprehension, we thankfully managed to wade our way through the crowded streets and make it to the library without incident. The Grand Canterlot Library
hearing
was a
some
step
sound
down
effects
from the
in the
Royal
background as well.
Archives, but admittedly
Like it's
it
raining
wasn't by
or something.
much. It was a sizable building with several wings, including one dedicated to everything we knew about Starswell the Bearded.
Oh,
Just as Floral Delight had
so
said,
it's like a themed
the
library.
information contained within the Grand Canterlot Library should have been more than enough to fulfill my research needs.
Yeah.
The problem wasn't the lack of resources.
Was
It
it?
never had been. Not really.
No?
The real issue I had with having to go to the public library as opposed to using the archives in the castle was the sheer amount of traffic coming in and out of said library.
Yeah, it's
Dozens
busy.
of ponies use the library each day for both work and recreational purposes during the day, even in this weather.
Oh, it is
While
raining.
something could definitely be said for a well-read population, it made the place a nightmare for a borderline recluse like me.
Yeah.
I felt like I was going to get lost in the crowd, and my escort looked exactly how I felt as we pushed our way
Yeah,
through
because
the procession
you're
of
technically a
patrons.
filly Twilight. You're going to get lost.
After some excessive apologizing
Especially
from
in
the
a large
off-duty
large
maid,
crowd
we entered the
situation. Yeah.
library and headed straight to the front desk near the entrance.
Front desk.
Fortunately, I'd remembered to bring my public library card with me when I moved to the
Having
castle.
fun isn't
It
hard
was
when
one
you
of
got a
the first
library
things I
card.
remembered to bring with me, and I'd gotten a good bit of mileage out of it before I was allowed into the archives.
Mileage?
Funnily enough, it was also a gift for my precious academic achievements. A laminated little number that had no expiration date.
Oh,
A
that's
single
good.
flash of that card to the stallion attending the front desk, and I had unfettered access to almost every wing in the Grand Canterlot Library. That
Every
didn't
wing.
mean as much as having access to every bit of the Royal Archives, but it was still something I was
You could
thankful for.
wing it, Twilight.
The next half hour or so was spent locating everything I needed for my research.
Everything.
Once I'd collected
Has he
everything
got
I
every
needed,
book you need,
the next
Twilight?
couple of hours melted into a haze of theories, algorithms, abstract diagrams, and complex terminology.
Terminology.
The rest of the world faded into something incomprehensible, and I lost myself in my studies.
Yeah. Or
I had no clue where my escort had gone or if she'd even left to begin with, nor did I care if that was the case.
what
This,
do you care
for
then?
me, was complete bliss. Of a sort. There was nothing I loved more than immersing myself in my academic pursuits,
And books.
especially after what happened with Blue Blood in the dungeon.
Yeah.
It kept my mind active,
But where's Blue
Focus.
Blood? Is he dead? Then?
distracted from other things I would have rather not had to think about.
Is he
I
dead?
could
Dead.
shut every pony and everything else out and be the exceptional student I strived to be.
Yes.
It was the
yes.
first time in a long time that I'd had a study session outside of the archives. And at that moment,
So
a fleeting thought
you don't
crossed
get
my
out
mind.
in public that long.
I
You don't.
entertained it,
You're not a
realizing
public. You're
that
not a
being away
public
from the castle,
pony. You have
away
to
from
be.
the toxicity of the nobles and their vicious rumors
It's like
wasn't such a bad thing.
Harry Potter, isn't it?
It
Why do
might
you thinking
actually
Harry
do me some
Potter?
good to leave the
Seriously.
castle more often.
Yeah.
And naturally, it was as I was entertaining that fleeting thought that I heard it.
Heard it.
It was a nothing statement spoken by a complete stranger sitting all the way at the opposite end of the same lengthy table where I was taking notes.
What did you hear?
It was a meaningless bit of background dialogue between two ponies that should have gone in one ear and out the other.
You're overhearing
They were
Twilight
words
Spot.
that should have passed right
Harry
over
Potter
me
then.
like an unobstructive breeze. And yet, for
Breeze?
some reason, those simple words were enough to shatter my concentration to pieces. Nah, I'll be transferring schools once the semester's out.
Oh.
My
Who's speaking?
quill stopped, hanging suddenly forlorn over a sentence half written near the bottom of the parchment. I flicked an ear towards the distant conversation
figure out who
almost
it is.
involuntarily. Something I wasn't exactly sure at the time made me pause and listen.
Listen.
Perhaps it was due to the vague sense of foreboding I hadn't been able to shake until a moment ago. The unicorn who had spoken seemed to be a student in his teenage years. Not a colt anymore, but not quite a full stallion just yet.
Is that Crimson?
His words were tinged with a bit of melancholy, and a weary sigh escaped his lips as he leaned back in his chair. Sitting across from him was a unicorn mare who looked about the same age. In response, she leaned forward,
Is that
her
Octavia?
expression full of concern. What? Why? I know you enrolled late, but it's only been 2 years.
2 years?
She replied in bewilderment.
2
If it's
years?
about the curriculum, I know some pony who can help. My
Twilight
older brother
Sparkle.
works as a part-time tutor. He can... It's not about the curriculum, Azalea. Well,
Azalea?
not entirely anyway.
What is it then?
The stallion interjected with raised hooves. That's part of it,
It is?
but it's mostly my mom.
Your mum.
Your mom? The mare replied, more bemused than before. I thought she was all for you going to CSGU. She even paid the additional tuition for enrolling mid-term.
How much is his
Yeah.
tuition then?
Well, that was before the whole exploding magical filly thing. He
What?
sighed.
Is that
You know
Twilight
how
Sparkle?
overprotective she is. After that mess, I practically had to beg her to let me stay this long.
I mean, it's
And
dangerous.
there
then.
it was. A fear I'd nearly forgotten about. A fear hidden somewhere deep in the back of my mind.
Your
The
mind.
fear that if I went out somewhere, I might run into some pony who recognized me from the incident.
Oh dear.
Other concerns had buried it somewhat, but I had never quite gotten over the guilt of what happened during the exam. The
I don't
princess
think-
had assured me that she'd take care of the issue regarding what happened back then, but I had my doubts.
Oh, is that?
Having just
the-
heard what I did, I felt those doubts turn
I
into certainty.
remember.
The incident hadn't been forgotten by the public. Even if the teachers didn't say anything,
It was Celestia's
there was
fault,
no
wasn't it?
chance in Tartarus that the students wouldn't. The thought nearly made me sick to my stomach. But what made it worse was having to hide the almost reflexive smile that crossed my face at the memory of what I'd seen during my catastrophic magic surge.
Oh, this
Now
was
all
it,
she
like
ever talks
the
about is how
exam.
the school
Was
doesn't
it?
care about the safety of its
Was it?
students.
Was it the entry exam?
The stallion complained. Says the school board should bar fools who haven't gotten past the magic surge phase from enrolling. Not that I really disagree, but still. But you weren't even there when it happened,
You could control the
the
magic.
mayor
though.
replied indignantly. And besides, they've already taken precautions against something like that happening again. Yeah, I told her that already,
Yeah.
but she's not having any of it.
It's the magic.
The stallion groaned. Says as long as they're accepting unstable foals in as students, then there could be another incident like that one.
He's
That
worried.
wasn't a normal magic search though.
No, it wasn't.
The mayor continued to argue. That was... I
Yeah.
don't even know. But from what I've heard,
It's a magic search of some
Billy had
sort.
some abnormally powerful magic that went out of control.
Very
Normal
powerful.
foals don't cause that kind of destruction when they surge, Alpine.
No.
I desperately needed to leave before they noticed me.
A horn
I
exploded.
wanted to, but I was
No,
rooted to
not
the
literally.
spot.
You know what I mean. Magic
I
came
don't
out.
know if it was a twisted sense of curiosity or some perverse delight in hearing about the incident.
But she didn't get accused
but
from that
something
search
kept me
though.
listening despite every nerve in my body telling me to flee the library. Torn between wanting to run and wanting to hear where the conversation
You need to
went,
gallop crush
I
away.
remained silent,
You need to gallop
my eyes
away.
fixed on the unfinished notes.
Notes.
Tell that to my mom. The stallion grumbled bitterly.
He wants to
No
stay.
matter what either of us says, the decision's already been made. Come the end of this school year, I'm out and heading to some fancy public school just south of the Noble District.
Fancy public school.
But it had nothing to do with you.
No, it didn't.
The mayor muttered despondently in turn. Well, you'll keep in touch, right?
Are they
What?
shipping? Are they a ship?
Yeah, of course I will, Zelly. The stallion, Alpine, replied with a reassuring, if slightly flustered, smile.
Smile.
It's not that far from CSGU.
No?
And even if it was, the commute back to this part of town wouldn't be all that bad.
No.
We can still, hang out.
Hang out. Yeah,
The conversation at
there's
that
a ship
point
there.
seemed to veer off to other topics. I breathed a small sigh of relief and tuned the apparent couple back out. They'd known
The
of
pound
me,
couple.
but there'd been no confrontation, and I was free to collect my things and leave before anything else happened.
So he
That had
wasn't
been
there,
my
but
intention,
somehow
at
he
least.
heard about the
But
medic
the
search.
moment I turned to leave, you're that filly, aren't you? The one whose
God.
irregular magic surge ruined the exam?
She's been found out.
I was immediately greeted by the sight of another unicorn filly standing mere inches from my face.
Oh God.
Startled by her sudden appearance, I shrieked and stumbled away a step or two, dropping all of my notes and books in the process.
Did you really
The
have to
filly
do
looked
that?
about my age, maybe a little younger, with a mane and tail that were strikingly similar to my own. Hidden behind
Oh, she does
thick
have a Q-tip
black
mark.
horn-rimmed glasses were dark violet eyes that shone with intelligence.
Horn glasses?
Everything about the other filly's demeanor, from her stiff posture to her words and expression, conveyed a cold and clinical sort of curiosity.
Is it a Twilight?
that
Is it
only
a
served to make
not
the
Twilight?
unexpected
Is a
encounter
Martin
all the
Granger now?
more
Yeah.
unnerving. Save for a slight furrowing of her rather bushy brows, the other filly stood unfazed by my reaction and simply waited silently for a reply.
Silent Ponyville.
No.
No.
How did you...
How do you know
I was there. At the
Oh.
exam, I mean.
you were there?
The filly interjected, cutting off my clumsy, unprepared response. With a flick of her horn and a bright grayish glow, she gathered up all the notes and books I'd dropped as she spoke.
Flick of the horn.
I was actually next in line to take it after you. I
Oh
saw
God.
the whole thing.
What are you gonna do then?
You did? I asked in a panicked near whisper. I did,
She might be an ally though.
she replied simply. She motioned for me to take my things, and reluctantly I did, though my hesitation went ignored as she continued to speak. It was quite a fascinating spectacle, to say the least.
It's
Though I have to
spectacle.
say, I wasn't
Show me
expecting
the
to ever
shine.
actually meet you face to
Razzle
face like this.
dazzle, glitz and glam.
Having
Sorry.
taken my things, I didn't really know what else to say.
No.
I was mortified, terrified.
Mortified.
And the forwardness of this filly, more than anything, put me at a complete loss for what to do. I opened my mouth to make some kind of response, when I suddenly got the eerie feeling that I was being watched.
Yes.
I turned, and sure enough, the two older students from before had stopped their conversation and were eyeing us.
Oh God.
Eyeing
Oh
me.
no.
I couldn't gauge either of their expressions from where I was standing, but there was a sudden shift in the atmosphere that I didn't like.
Everybody's
No
gonna look
doubt
at you
my
now.
outburst had caught their attention, and I was almost certain they'd heard my exchange with the filly. With that conclusion in mind,
Eavesdropping, like
I
you did,
finally
Twilight.
decided to make my exit. I'm sorry. I quickly stammered, pushing my way past the surprised filly.
She can't control the magic
Thanks
though.
for the help, but I have to go.
Go.
What? Hey, wait. I heard the filly call out from behind. Wait a minute. But rather than
wait.
look back, I just kept going, not even knowing where I was running off to. The
Oh,
only
God.
thing I wanted at that moment was to get as far away from those three as possible. Completely ignoring
She
the
doesn't.
usual
Okay,
etiquette
Twilight
I
Sparkle
showed
didn't
whenever I
trust
was in
that
a
Billy,
library,
but at the
I
same
quickly
time,
scurried
she
past
could be an
surprised
ally.
and offended
Ally,
ponies,
not a metal,
occasionally
but ally.
muttering an "excuse me" or "sorry" as I passed.
Sorry.
By the time I finally stopped to catch my breath, I realized I had no idea where I'd gone. I knew the Grand Canterlot Library fairly well from the days before I lived at the castle,
Where have you
but
run
I
to?
didn't know everything about it.
No?
There were several places in the library I'd never been to either because I wasn't allowed entry, or that particular section of the building held no interest to me.
Oh? Like
It was
fiction.
in one of those sections that I wound up, surrounded by
Oh,
countless
you're still in the
bookshelves
library?
full
Okay,
of
I thought you
unfamiliar
ran
books.
outside.
Looking around, I couldn't see any other ponies in the immediate area, and the silence was oddly pressing. I was
Silence
reminded
in the
heavily
library.
of the empty corridor that led to the abandoned dungeons. The memory of it made me shudder
Oh
slightly
God,
as I turned
no.
this way and that,
Blue blood.
trying to find out where I'd come from. Wait, please, just hang on a minute.
Gosh, she quite fast.
A cacophony of panting and wheezing and the clop of hurried and uneven hoof steps against the carpeted floor caught my
She's
ear
fast.
and made me turn,
To get
my
there.
eyes wide with a mix of panic and surprise.
Surprise.
A short
I will be
distance
surprised
behind
too.
and getting closer with each moment was the bespectacled filly from before. Her glasses had gone askew, and her face was positively shining with sweat, but she didn't stop.
No. Let
I
me
wasn't
speak to
exactly
you.
an athletic pony to begin with, but I wasn't on my last legs like the other fillies seemed to be. The idle thought that the filly was even more out of shape than I was crossed my mind, but I quickly discarded that in favor of the situation at hoof.
Yes.
What?
What?
What do you want?
What do you want?
I cried, taking another step back as the filly stumbled to a stop in front of me. If it's about the exam, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's not about the exam. The filly panted warily. She paused and hung her head for a moment as she desperately tried to catch her breath.
Let her explain,
Okay.
Twilight.
Well, it kind of is, but just give me a second.
Catch her breath.
I was unsure of what to make of the situation as a whole, but looking at the worn-out filly and taking in her words, it didn't look like she'd chased me down to antagonize me. If anything, it seemed like she had something important to tell me.
Yes,
curiosity grew
let's
just a
speak.
bit
I'm
more,
Twilight.
And
Please.
rather than take the chance to run again, I chose to wait. It was sometime in the near future, a decision I'd both come to cherish and regret in equal measure. Your name is Twilight Sparkle, right?
Yes.
I flinched at her question. Yes, but how do you know my name? She let out one last winded breath before straightening
was
up
dead,
and adjusting
remember?
her glasses. When she spoke again, it was in that same clinically cold tone of curiosity as before. My name is Moondancer, and if you don't mind, I'd like to pick the
Moondancer!
brain of the filly whose magic surge single-hoofedly turns the thaumatological community on its head.
I didn't make connection. I forgot about Sparrow said something.
Chapter
Hello,
15.
Moondancer. I forgot she was in
Filly.
here. Oh, this music together.
Moondancer wanted to pick my brain. This filly, who had watched me spontaneously raise a dragon
That's
to
how they met.
adulthood and nearly destroy an entire school with my magic search, wanted
forgot-
to know
because
what
Sparrow
made
did
me
mention this.
tick.
I
The
forgot.
idea was so
I
laughable
forgot she was in
that I
there.
actually
But
did
when this old
chuckle a
Taven
bit
come
at
into
her
play, man.
words, though it was more an uncomfortable, disbelieving chuckle than anything else. Looking back, I'm sure she wasn't trying to sound like some obsessed stalker, but
No.
at the same time, that's about all I could think when I heard that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I really need to go.
Let
I replied,
her help.
anxiety making my voice several
Twilight.
octaves higher than normal. I racked my brain for some kind of excuse to leave, and thankfully, it didn't take me long to find one.
Yeah.
I got separated from my chaperone. She's probably really worried, so I should...
Twilight.
I began edging around the other filly in an attempt to escape, and even managed to make it most of the way before Moondancer followed after me. I can help you look, she offered almost immediately. 2 heads are better than 1, right? Well, I mean, that's...
True.
I felt like the saying didn't exactly apply here the way she probably
Let
meant it
her
to,
help,
but
Twilight.
she didn't seem to care either way. The bespectacled filly seemed to lack any kind of self-awareness, brushing off my admittedly subtle attempts to remove myself from her presence.
Also, there's no
Given my
continuity
self-conscious and
with the
impotent
show, by the way,
nature,
just let you know
I
that.
couldn't simply tell her to just get lost and be done with it. In the end, I just let her follow me around as I tried to find my way out of what I now knew was the administration and finance wing of the library. I didn't want to think of her as a nuisance, but at that moment, that's exactly what she was. Unfortunately, trying to suppress my irritation only made it manifest in other ways. As we made our way back to the main area, Moondancer, too busy trying to get my attention, hadn't been paying any heed to where she was going and bumped into one of the taller, wider, heavier bookshelves.
Oh dear.
In reality, nothing happened and the bookshelf didn't even budge an inch, but in my head, I didn't quite see it that way. What
you
I
see,
saw
Twilight?
was that same bookshelf toppling over like a massive domino on top of the inattentive filly.
It's a domino effect,
What I
after
heard
all.
was a startled cry and a sickening crunch, followed by a long and gratifying silence. It was only one instance, and the image was nowhere near as vivid as what happened with Crimson Storm.
Yeah.
But it did wonders to ease both my anxiety and aggravation. My
Anxiety.
imagination hadn't taken over like that in a while, but then again, I hadn't let my guard down like that in a while either. I wanted to be worried, but I couldn't bring myself to stop the satisfied sigh that escaped my lips. I couldn't even bring myself to complain all that much because the thought of Moondancer's
She wants
life
to be
being
your friend,
snuffed out
Twilight.
made her presence much more bearable.
She wants to be your friend.
It was funny how that worked.
Yeah.
Funny, and more than a little concerning.
It's very
In
concerning,
any case,
Twilight.
I was in a slightly better mood and found myself more willing to talk. Though, what about was still cause for some worry.
Worry.
Surprisingly, one of the first questions out of Moondancer's mouth wasn't about my mental state like I'd feared,
It was
but a
about...
question I hadn't even given any thought to. That mana, where did it all come from? She asked, adjusting her glasses and eyeing me with something like awe.
She wants to be a friend, Twilight. That's why
I was certain you were going to fail that exam, but when the Sonic Rainboom happened and your magic just... Wait. Sonic Rainboom?
Rainbow?
I interrupted with a confused frown. What's a Sonic Rainboom? You mean that giant explosion Everypony was talking about?
She
It
doesn't
had
know.
been some time since the incident, but I'd never really tried to delve into why it happened or what triggered my magic surge in the first place.
So...
Back then, I simply wanted to distance myself
It
from
was
the
Rainbow
events of the
Dash, but we
exam
don't...
and
It
gave
wasn't...
no
It's not
thought
part of the
to
story,
any of the
though.
circumstances surrounding it. By the time the experts and the media had pinpointed the exact cause of my surge, I'd already shut it all out, and Celestia never bothered to tell me.
No,
Of
she
course,
wouldn't.
that
She
was likely
wouldn't.
her way of trying to help me put the
So the
traumatic
Sonic
event behind
Rainbow
me.
powered the magic so much.
You don't know? Moondancer replied, her expression matching my own.
Yeah.
How do you not know? You were the most affected by that destructive phenomenon. Well,
Well, you just...
you and that Pegasus filly. Pegasus filly?
Rainbow
I hadn't
Dash.
thought it possible for my expression to grow even more confused than it already was.
Yeah.
And yet... What are you talking about? What Pegasus filly? What does
Rainbow!
she have to do with what happened back then?
Is it Rainbow?
I hadn't wanted to talk about the exam. That's the other reason why I wanted to get away from Moondancer. But now my curiosity was taking over, and I couldn't help but ask.
Let her
There were
let her
quite a lot
finish
of details
on
I
Twilight. Let her
purposely
finish.
overlooked about that incident. Far more than I expected, given what Moondancer had to say.
Yeah.
The other filly stopped and looked at me, searching my face. You really don't know.
No, she
Do you?
doesn't. No,
No, I don't.
I don't.
I frowned. I wasn't really in a good place after all of that happened.
No.
I hardly even remember any of it. And to be honest, I didn't really want to.
So
wasn't
yeah,
a
it was
complete
traumatic
but-
for Twilight though, wasn't it?
Oh, I see.
Oh,
Sudden clarity
I
seemed
see.
to come to Moondancer then. She cleared her throat before looking away awkwardly. Right. I suppose you wouldn't, would you?
No.
Her weirdly professional aloofness vanished, and in its place was embarrassment and what I thought might have even been a bit of guilt. Apparently,
It's
she
not your
finally
fault,
realized
Twilight.
how overly forward she had been in her approach, and was regretting it.
Yeah.
And from the look on her face, she was regretting it deeply. The sudden change in her demeanor had been so drastic that I was completely caught off guard and had no idea what to say.
You think
For
of
a
something,
long,
Twilight.
uncomfortable moment, we each just stood there outside the administration and finance wing, neither of us knowing how to respond.
Yeah.
Wanting to break the awkward silence, I started to open my mouth.
They're
to
gonna be
say
friends, aren't they?
something,
They're gonna be a good. She's gonna
wasn't sure
be
where
a
the
good friend
conversation
to
would go.
Twilight.
but Moondancer saved me the trouble when she sighed and turned to face me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, she said, her face the very picture of apologetic.
Moondancer cares.
I get carried away when it comes to,
Exams.
these kinds of things.
Yeah.
She cleared her throat again and regained some of her cool attitude. I didn't think about how painful something like that must have been for you, and for that,
She cares.
I apologize.
She cares.
But I won't
Moondancer
apologize
cares.
for being curious. I just
There's-
looked at her.
There's nothing wrong being
In all
curious.
honesty, I completely understood her reasoning because I was the same way when it came to my own interests.
Yeah.
Not only that,
You
but
are
I could
like
tell her
each
apology
other.
was genuine, if a bit
Even the
curt.
main style is similar.
I had no problem forgiving her for her lack of self-awareness,
Yeah.
but it was her last statement that threw me off and left me without a proper response.
Yeah.
She sounded so defensive, as though
Defensive.
she was trying to wear her curiosity like a badge of pride. And with her next words, I realized that's exactly what she was doing.
What she was doing then?
After all, she continued, adjusting her glasses and puffing out her tiny chest. I'm a scholar, and scholars should never apologize for being curious. If we're not willing to ask, then how are we supposed to learn? Right?
That
I-
is very true.
I guess that's true,
Of course it's true.
I replied slowly. I paused, then chuckled in spite of myself a moment later.
Yeah.
But, you know,
What?
there's also a lot to be learned by just listening.
Yeah.
Also true. Moondancer gave a sage nod, as if she'd known that all along.
Of course she knows that.
But it's not like you were offering up anything on your own. So
No.
I'm sorry, but that rebuttal doesn't hold water where you're concerned.
Oh.
I couldn't help it. I laughed aloud at that. And what are you laughing about?
What are you laughing about?
She asked, looking affronted. Her
She's
expression just made me laugh.
She's
all
a
the
very
harder.
caring pony,
It
Twilight.
got to a point where I was starting to draw attention to myself, and I quickly got it under control. I shook my head and motioned for
They're
the
gonna
two
stop
of us
probably
to
hard at
continue
the end of
walking.
the. Oh, there's something. I don't know.
I'm sorry, I replied, still chuckling a little. I don't really know what came over me, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I can get carried away too sometimes, so
Yes,
I
you
can't
can,
really blame
Twilight.
you. Not completely, anyway.
Yeah.
I was too young to understand why Moondancer's words and attitude made me laugh then.
Yeah.
I realize now that it was because she was just like me in a lot of ways. Just a little more impatient to who she thought she was meant to be. As a filly, it was something I only understood at a subconscious level,
Yeah.
but that was enough.
You found yourself a
Even
friend,
if I
Twilight.
couldn't pin down the exact reason, it was enough for me to make a connection to who I thought would be the first real friend I'd ever had beyond my brother.
Yes.
Talking to Moondancer became a lot easier at any rate.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Moondancer replied, and her next words and expression became uncertain.
Oh?
So, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but my magic during the exam? I guessed. I can't really tell you where it all came from, but
No.
the princess says a magic surge like that, while rare, isn't as uncommon as you'd think among unicorn folks.
Oh?
Really?
Oh,
Moondancer
right.
asked, intrigued. And wait, you said the princess.
Yes.
When did you hear that from the princess? I
When?
don't remember her saying anything like that at the exam. Oh, well,
You can say,
I
Twilight.
hesitated, then smiled awkwardly. She came to visit me after I woke up in the hospital.
Yeah.
She wanted to let me know everything was okay, and we started talking, and yeah.
It came out, yeah.
Again, it wasn't a complete lie. Celestia had been to visit me in the hospital, but that conversation hadn't happened until much later when I'd already become her protege. I
Much
hadn't
later.
initially meant to lie, but something at that moment told me not to tell her the whole truth.
Yeah,
Somewhere in the back of my
you just
mind,
can become
it
friends.
felt like it would have been
You
a
have
bad
to be very
idea,
limited what
so
you
I
actually,
said
what
nothing about
information
my
you give to
teacher-student
her.
relationship with Princess Celestia.
Yeah.
Huh.
Huh.
Moondancer replied after a thoughtful pause. Well,
Pregnant
if any
pause.
pony would know, it only makes sense it would be the princess. And I
course.
guess statistically, there would have had to have been similar cases at some point in the past.
Yes.
She
Over
shook her
1,000 years
head
of
and
history
smiled
here.
a slightly envious smile. Still, you're pretty lucky. What with the princess coming to see you personally and all?
It's a
Yeah.
protege, isn't it?
I said before changing the subject. But anyway, you still haven't told me about that Pegasus and the... what did you call it? A sonic...
surge?
rain
Rainbow.
boom?
Rainbow, yeah.
Right. The sonic rain boom.
Rainbow Dash.
Moondancer nodded. I don't know all the details, but apparently there was this race happening in Cloudsdale.
His
She then
rainbow!
proceeded to
His
tell me
rainbow
all about
dash!
how this Pegasus filly flew so fast she caused a sonic boom.
But she doesn't know
Evidently,
Rainbow Dash.
she'd managed to tap into the mana in her veins to build up extra speed, and when she broke the sound barrier, all that mana got released in one huge burst. Thus,
Yeah.
the sonic rain boom.
Was born.
There was more to it,
Yes.
but that was essentially the basic outline of the working theory crafted by thaumatological experts. Supposedly,
You're going too
it was a
fast.
phenomenon that only happened maybe 2 other times in history. A feat so rare that it had slipped into legend. For some
2
reason,
in history.
there were some that even called it the miracle that begets miracles. A phrase that only made me frown
Miracle?
as I remembered
What?
the
Miracles
miracle
beget
it bestowed
miracles?
upon me.
What?
Thankfully, having realized that she'd been too forward in asking about me, Moondancer was all too happy to veer off into other topics.
Yeah. She's got
We
lots to
talked for a little
say.
while longer about other things, like our academic pursuits and our current studies and the like.
They like?
All the while, I did everything I could to skirt around the fact that the princess was my personal teacher,
Yes, she
mentioning
was.
only that I had a private tutor. I was beginning to feel bad about the half-truths and lies of a mission, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I wasn't ready to trust the other filly just yet. I was growing to like
Yeah,
Moondancer
you've
the
only
more
just
we
got to
talked,
know each other.
but
Well,
I
you only
hadn't
got
forgotten
to...
Blue Blood
You haven't
or
known
even
her for
Crimson
long.
Storm. Yes, I was trying to put all of that behind me, but the wounds and conflicting emotions were still there beneath the surface.
It's not Flurry, is it?
Still,
Flurry on the
we'd
motorcycle.
reached some common ground in our desire to learn, so I pushed my concerns
This
down
episode
and
name,
just
Common
let
Ground?
myself
That's the
enjoy the
episode name.
conversation for a time. Eventually, we found our way back to the main area where I spotted my mousy caretaker having a silent panic attack over by the front desk. An uncomfortable looking pony behind the desk The Earth Pony Stallion I'd shown my library card to was trying to calm the frantically whispering mare with little success.
Yeah.
I winced at the sight and backed away a step before turning to Moondancer. Hey, so... I nodded towards the off-duty maid. That mare over there? She's the one I came here with, and it kinda looks like I should be getting back.
Yeah.
Huh? Moondancer followed my gaze and grimaced at the distraught mare. Oh, yes. You should probably do that before she embarrasses herself anymore.
Yeah.
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 I chuckled as I began trotting toward the desk. Well, it was nice meeting you, Moondancer. Wait. She held up a hoof.
Shake your hand.
You said you were studying for the midterm entrance exam, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And?
that's right. I replied slowly.
She's doing the same?
If I pass, I'll be accepted into CSGU as a sort of temp student for the next 3 months.
Temp student.
Right. Well... She hesitated a moment, but collected herself quickly. My mom works here as an admin service manager, so I can pretty much come here anytime I want. If you need any help with your studies, I usually come here every weekend around this time. So...
That's some friend there.
She trailed off expectantly, and I was left to mull over her offer. I only had 2 weeks to study before I took the actual exam, and I expected to have my ID for the Royal Archives in hoof well before then.
But?
Once I had that, I wouldn't need to come back here.
But you got
ultimately,
friends.
I decided it wouldn't be an issue to have her help me over the weekend.
Yeah.
Besides, I didn't know exactly when I'd get my ID back.
No.
So until then, the library was my best option.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I finally replied, choosing to ignore Moondancer's not so subtle sigh of relief. I'll probably be coming back here for the next few days to study and check out...
She found a new friend. Twilight Sparkle's found a new friend.
Then. She
See
gave
ya.
one last adjustment of her thickly rimmed glasses and slipped back into her aloof persona.
That's like Harry Potter, isn't it?
I'm pretty busy myself, but I'll see if I can take some time to find you then.
Yeah.
Sounds good. My last reply was somewhat distracted, as the stallion had apparently spotted me from afar.
Distracted.
He pointed me
Very
out to
distracted.
my panicking caretaker, and I took that as my cue to leave.
Yeah.
I waved one last goodbye to Moondancer and made the rest of the way over to the maid, looking like she was doing everything she could not to just hug me like I was her lost daughter returning back home. After a surprisingly stern talking to from the maid about my disappearance, I checked out my
It came very close
materials,
to the hugging,
and we
yeah.
began heading out the double doors and back out to the city. The drizzle from earlier had turned into a full-blown downpour, but the umbrellas we'd brought were enough to keep most of the rain at bay.
We'll call it a brolly.
My chaperone may have been miserable in the pouring rain, but I couldn't be happier with how my visit had ended, even if it hadn't started out all that well.
It's very well
I might
now.
have had something to look forward to for my next trip to the library, I couldn't really say the same about my return to the castle, unfortunately.
Oh god.
My
Yeah.
troubles were only just beginning where the castle was concerned.
Something's worse is gonna happen? I don't know. To be continued. Okay, that was our process elimination. MLP Grimdark Audiobook Part 4, Chapters 12 to 15. Okay, that's the end of that story. I really enjoyed that. So let's get back to the beginning of the story of Chapter 12, for instance, for this one. It was good. Twilight Sparkle is still kind of probably hesitant or worried that something is going on. She wanted to go to the, quote, the archives. So it's basically like where all the important documents are stored. Like in Doctor Who, with the Black Archives where all the aliens artifacts are kept. This is basically anything that come across in the Pony universe, maybe like Star Wars World of Beard's books or something. I don't know. That lady at the archive desk, I don't trust her one bit. I don't trust her at all. There's something about her that rings alarm bells. Literally, alarm bells. I don't think she was actually trying to get her ID card. I think the ID card is still there, but she made up some story that is not there. That's my reckon. And the guard, or the road guard, wanted to help her. So I don't know what is going on there at all. So in the end, Twilight Sparkle has to go to the main Canterlot library that we saw Moondance for the first time, actually. I think it's the first time I went to that library. And in fact, we did see we did hit Moondancer. I didn't see Moondancer because it's not part of the picture, but Moondancer now, I believe, is now Twilight Sparkle's friend. They only just become friends. So I think also Moondancer would also be a great ally or great friend to be with. You got Crimson Storm. Wasn't much from him, but he may resurface. I think Blue Blood is history, but I don't want to say too much in case something does happen. Something sinister is down the horizon. Something bad or something really bad down the horizon. And the magic surge was down to the Sonic Rainbow Dash, maybe. Even though Rainbow Dash is not part of the story. As far I'm aware, it's not part of the story. She doesn't know about that occurrence. And it really caused her magic to go haywire. Literally, her magic did go haywire because of the Sonic Rainbow. Moondancer is also very caring. Very caring. She can get to Twilight's level. And she's so calm about it. And she probably wants to help Twilight with her studies. And I'm expecting... Okay, Twilight Sparkle and Moondancer are basically like the same sort of pony in terms of personality. They want to work alone. They don't have many friends. And having like Twilight Sparkle and Moondancer as friends it was bound to happen. She understands. She can get onto the level. Literally, she can get onto Twilight Sparkle's level. Probably the real friend that she's ever had, because she didn't have Spike as a friend or as a number one assistant. That didn't happen. So she needed she needed a friend. She needed a friend that, when even in the show, Twilight Sparkle didn't like the idea of having friends. And in the end, you need friends in your life to be happy. I'm expecting that people who work alone are very depressed. And they urge having friends in their life. Really, you need it. You need it. You need to grasp the friendship, maybe. I don't know. Grasp the friendship. The cutie mark is similar. Even Moondancer is similar. I'm not sure if it's tied up into like a ponytail on the fringe or bangs. Even the hairstyle is a bit like Twilight Sparkle as well. But what is going to happen next? I don't know. Like I said, I don't trust that filly in the archives. She may make things very difficult for Twilight. Maybe in the actual exam itself. She might want to sabotage the exam. Or cause something to Twilight. I'm just speculating, but we're going to hear more from her. And Moondancer, we're going to hear more from the Black Archives pony. I don't trust her. Don't trust her at all. She's got a cunning... I think she's got a cunning plan. She wants Twilight stopped, maybe dead. I don't know. But something is up with her. Seriously, something's up with her. I don't know what it is, but something's really going on with her. I'm not sure if it's connected to the moon, to the Blue Blood situation, or she knew what happened down in the cellars or in the dungeons. But she knows something. She knows something. Deep down, she knows something. And she knows more about Twilight than Twilight knows about her. Well, on that note, hopefully like this reaction, my reaction videos I do, and I'll see you next time. Oh, yes.
And I'll fly until